Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Andy Lange, welcome to the conversation today.
Good to be here. Thanks, John.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Dallas, Texas currently, in an office in North Dallas.
Nice. I love Texas. I love Dallas. It's been probably 6 months or so since I was last there, but great to have you joining me. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. Today, Andy and I are going to be talking about the evolving role of HR leaders. I think this is an incredibly important and timely topic, especially in the midst of kind of the AI revolution and all of the disruptions that are occurring. The whole landscape of work is shifting. And of course, all of that has huge implications for leaders generally, but particularly for people and culture, for HR, for people management professionals. It's incredibly important to be thinking about how all of this is, the ground is shaking and shifting below us and around us, and we have to have new strategies for how we're going to be approaching things in the future. As we get started, I wanted to share Andy's bio with everybody. Andy Lange is the Senior Vice President of People at Take Command, bringing over 15 years of combined HR executive leadership and operational experience. Prior to his current role, he served as CEO for 7 years and as partner and general manager, where he led business operations, talent strategy, and organizational growth. His career blends hands-on HR leadership with executive level insight, enabling him to build scalable people programs that align with business objectives. Andy's practical real-world approach to helping HR leaders elevate their strategic impact through modern benefits strategies has been shared through speaking and editorial opportunities for Benefits Pro, HR Southwest, Business.com, and SHRM, among others. And again, it's just a real pleasure, Andy, to have you joining me today on this call. And I appreciate the time, the insights that you're going to be sharing with me and my audience today. Anything you would like to share by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
Well, part of my background was in Eastern Europe. I know, John, you've had some footprint over there, and I think there's some part of your work that's over there. So I'm very international. I have a lot of cultural experience. So that's just one of the fun facts about me, and the current role I'm in, interestingly, is in the health benefits space. And so I'm an HR leader for a company, but what we provide is something called an individual coverage HRA, ICHRA, which is a mouthful. So apologies, I'll try not to say it too often, but that's kind of one of the topics that ICHRA is a strategic lever that an HR person can use if they know about it, and most people don't know about it. So I am here to talk about that, but also hopefully we can get into just some of the challenges because it's never been more challenging to be a leader, and to your point, an HR leader, I think even more challenging.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm very curious. So what parts of Eastern Europe have you spent time in? I've been
Budapest, Hungary.
Hungary. Excellent. Very, very good. Yeah,
Where, yeah,
I've spent
you've been
time
where?
in
Yeah.
in Belarus and Poland and some countries around there. Very, very beautiful, wonderful place. Also very different than
So different.
what we're used to here. So
So different. But I think I've learned some universal truths as I've kind of navigated leadership in different roles, that people are people and the
that's
human
very
condition
true.
is the human condition regardless. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you started talking about ICRAs just a little bit, and before we get into the broader, topic of just the evolving role of HR leaders, maybe we could spend a little bit more time on that in particular, since that's a particular area of expertise that you hold. What exactly is an ICRA? How does it work? And how could it be part of the general strategic puzzle that HR leaders are using?
Yeah, so hopefully I won't go too long, John. You just poke me if I start talking too long because I'll talk about this forever. But ICHRA at its core is, instead of a group plan where HR, typically some HR admin, picks a plan for everybody, ICHRA is a mechanism that allows you to give people money so that they can pick their own plan.
Hmm.
They have to be educated on how to choose their own insurance, but ultimately they can choose an insurance that works best for them, which is something that is more and more important. And it gives them the control over how much they're actually going to spend on insurance. And one of the challenges in health benefits and just the employee value proposition generally is oftentimes employers are required to provide insurance, but oftentimes the employee can't afford their portion, and so they don't end up taking insurance. And so you have a lot of issues with employees actually not being covered.
Absolutely. So with this kind of approach, how have you seen it implemented? I can imagine that many employees would just think, oh my gosh, I don't know enough to even know how to choose my own plan. I would rather my employer just, do a blanket selection, and then, I can choose between maybe two or three options instead of like a gazillion options. How much of that have you run into, and like what's a way around that as HR leaders?
I mean, maybe I'll just zoom out, a little bit, and I'll maybe talk about just the employee value proposition.
Mm,
Because, and for those that don't know, that is, I'm going to give you something in exchange for something. That's what a value proposition is. And so, an employee value proposition is you're going to come work for me and give me your time and your energy, and I'm going to give you something in return. And there's kind of two parts to that employee value proposition. There's something that's very tangible and measurable. So, your pay, your insurance, what the policies are, hybrid, remote, how flexible is the work, time off, etc. So that's something that costs the business money. And then there's this intangible part, which is that belonging and meaning and
hmm
purpose and the sense of accomplishment. So those are two balances of an employee value proposition. If you're really high on one but low on the other, then you're kind of out of balance. That's been the case. So I'm just kind of setting the stage. And now layer onto it, and now you've got four generations of people working now at the same time. Probably is the first time in their history. So, and
hmm
they all have a different need from that value proposition perspective. So if you think of that scale, if you have boomers, they are heavy on healthcare. Their retirement's going to matter a lot. They're going to need the stability. It kind of moves through Gen X to flexibility, but family support is really important, and career security stays. But millennials and Gen Zs, it drops off drastically. And these people need meaning and purpose. And I talked to an executive the other day. He says, I wake up every day hoping that I'm fulfilling my purpose. He has
hmm
kids. He has a job and he's trying to go make money, but that's not what he talks about in the morning. And so that when you go think about health insurance and you try to pick a health insurance plan for a group of people like this, it's very difficult to do. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult. So, at what Take Command, so we eat our own dog food, so we provide the ICRA, but we also participate in it. So what I have seen personally is that regardless of kind of what is important to you, you can sit down with somebody from our team and they can walk you through what your needs are and find a plan that works. And you can check the health insurance box, which is important on the employee value proposition. What's really cool, and we can get into this, is that ICRA in most cases for a company is cheaper than regular health insurance. So then
Right.
what do you do with the savings? And a lot of times HR just gives it up and says, we're a cost center. Now we're less of a cost center. This is great. My challenge to your listeners is work on that employee value proposition and figure out where you are to kind of balance out and become the best employment opportunity for your employees as possible.
I love that. And I think that leads us really well into kind of the broader scope of the conversation. So first of all, I imagine that a lot of people in the audience today don't know much or haven't had direct experience with ICRAs in the past. And so this hopefully will give you something to look into and to think more about, either for yourself or for your people, whatever. But also the complete employee value proposition kind of framework that you were describing, which is really, really important. And we know that the cost of benefits and healthcare in particular, that it's just almost unsustainable how much it increases year over year, right? And employers are spending a third of total cost, total labor cost on just providing benefits for their employees for worse and worse coverage every year. And this is just, I mean, this is a systemic problem in the US system. It's certainly a challenge and problem for organizations. It's a problem for individuals, for families, right? It's a hard thing. And
Yeah.
so if you can find new, different innovative ways to help people have the care that they need, while also, having a higher value in that employee value proposition, saving money for the organization, finding ways to reinvest those savings into other areas that are really going to help the employees and the employee experience, then it becomes a win-win-win all the way around, doesn't it?
It really does. And we've seen, where value propositions are really high on the intangible is a nonprofit. These nonprofits
Right.
are
Hmm.
changing the world, and the people are so dedicated. So they wake up every morning feeling like they're changing the world. It's hard to do that if you work for an oil company. It's a little bit easier when you work for a nonprofit. And so, no knock on oil companies if you're out there that love the oil industry. You're great. You're gonna get in trouble. But
But no, meaning
you
and
know,
purpose is a huge
meaning and
driver for
purpose
a
is
lot of
important.
people. Yeah.
And so we have nonprofits that come to us saying we might have to go out of business. We had a company in Utah, 400 people. We might have to shut up shop as we can't afford the health insurance, and we have a requirement. We're an applicable large employer, so we have to provide insurance, and we can't find insurance that isn't going up astronomically in prices, and we're in trouble. We're going to have to let people go. And they went to ICRA. Not only could they, they saved money. So not the prices didn't go up. They actually saved money, and they end up getting a 96% satisfaction score on their surveys. Good for them. Not everybody gets that result. So that's like a big picture. A little picture, that's like zooming out, zooming in. And I kind of hinted at this story earlier when, we had an employer, an admin that we were speaking to, and they provided insurance for their employees for years. And little did they know that there was somebody that never accepted the insurance
Mm.
because they couldn't afford the employee contribution part. And so they rolled out an ICRA. It's not much different. You still got to have insurance, but you get to pick the insurance. And they were able to cover the entire amount of the contribution. And so this employee in tears in front of the HR admin is like, I have insurance for the first time in years. And that's like an individual person. So you have the big picture, you keep companies alive, but you can also make a difference on individual people. What's hard is the change management. I'm going to go change, do something very different. And it's sometimes hard to believe that it's true. And you try to knock the marketplace, which is like Obamacare, and you think Obamacare is bad insurance. It's actually not true anymore. That risk pool has gotten much, much bigger. So you think there's a group of millions of people now instead of your 400 person group, there's millions. And the insurance is actually becoming very competitive and actually really good in some states. So if I was to counsel somebody listening, you don't have to know much about ICRA. Know that it's an option. Start asking whoever it is that's your benefits consultant, ask them to go look into ICRA because it could be this magic pill that you had no idea you had to really work on your employee value proposition. And I wrote this ebook recently, and we'll plug it at the end. Hopefully, you can put a link in the bio, maybe. But this ebook is trying to spark some of the ideas of what you can do with the savings, and not just save the company money, but actually really boost your value proposition and continue to change the world. I mean, that's the way I look at it. We want to keep changing the world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful. I appreciate more of that background and considering this as a piece of the overall puzzle. Like there's all these different things we can use, different levers we can use in creating strategic value for our organizations, for our people. That employee value proposition that you mentioned. Let's now zoom out a little bit and talk a little bit more generally about how this, as one piece among other pieces, how does that influence the evolving role of HR leaders and how they're balancing business value with employee benefits as we move into this increasingly complex, constant change environment in the workplace?
I mean, it's such a loaded question, John. I mean, what I think is really, in having been across the world and seen it, the challenges that businesses face, are innumerable, and it's hard to, solve the challenges for each company, which is why the role of HR is becoming increasingly more important.
Hmm.
Because benefits admin, making sure people get paid and have a place to work is table stakes, but that's of course has to happen. But how can you do that and be a strategic partner to help solve some of the business problems? And a lot of HR folks feel like they're not heard, but they see everything. They're more in touch with the real resources of the business than probably anybody else, being the human resources. These are the people that are driving the work. And IBM did a study in 2016 where they 23,000 people, and they studied this thing that they call the Employee Experience Index. And they asked a bunch of questions and tried to be scientific. And what they proved is what every HR person knows, that if the employee experience is high, then their discretionary effort is high. And the
Hmm. Hmm.
discretionary effort is this: I'm going to give more than kind of what you're asking me to give because I care so much about this. And so HR leaders really need to be able to use some of that data to drive the performance of the company through human resources. You can't solve the tariffs that are happening. I get that. But how do I get more out of a person? And the more you have to focus and spend time on the table stakes, the paying the people and the benefits, which is what I think AI and technology will help solve. I think ICRA is a piece of this puzzle. It can help solve it also. That's the administrative piece. You can now go and really get to know your group and understand what the needs are and how do you get the most out of these people. Trust me, people want to get the most out of themselves. That's what they want. And HR really needs to be positioned to do that. And it's hard to do when you're in an administrative role.
Yeah, we've all been in positions in organizations where we felt underutilized, where you wake up in the morning, you drag yourself out of bed, you're not thrilled about the work you're going to be doing, that meaning and
Hmm.
purpose may not be there. But it's not just because of, big meaning and purpose like at a nonprofit, but it's also just personal meaning and purpose through ongoing development, ongoing career opportunities, like all of it's a huge package of all these different things that go into how people feel those intrinsic motivations. And we've all been in roles where we just didn't feel it. And you could be working for the best organization with the best boss, but for whatever reason, you're just not being utilized to the fullest. And you're bored, or you don't feel like your ideas are being, utilized, or whatever the case may be. And so everything that you were just talking about is absolutely true, that we need to find ways to recognize the greatest asset of any organization, the human asset, which is how you literally create every new innovative customer facing experience or product or service, right? And you have to have it, and you have to have good people. And yet we often just think of HR as a cost center, instead of a reinvestment center into that human asset. We invest in plant equipment property, for upkeep and maintenance. If you have a big piece of machinery, you better be sure that every organization is going to be getting regular maintenance on that big piece of equipment. They're going to be improving it over time. And that costs a lot of money, right? And for some reason, though, we don't always think about it that way when we're thinking about people. And so, ICRAs is one piece, or whatever your benefits approach is within your organization, your general total compensation strategy. Ultimately, I think it really serves us better when we can get away from the cost center kind of mindset and think about the reinvestment mindset. And ICRAs are great because in many cases they really can free up extra resources towards that reinvestment. Um, could you maybe give us some examples that you see of employers, who are taking any ICRA savings and reinvesting it back into their workforce, to reinvest in their people, to increase that competitive advantage that they might have?
Yeah, it's very similar to a story I just told you. We had another healthcare nonprofit. This is now in Pennsylvania. Considerable, because they moved to an ICRA, considerable savings. So they were
Hmm.
able to contribute to an HSA, which they weren't doing before,
Hmm.
saved $1.5 million total, and removed all employee contributions.
Yeah.
So that is a huge boost. What I want to add, though, and I know that this is I've listened to a few of your other recordings. The business side and the human side, from my perspective, and I think from a good HR perspective, are not disconnected. They are the same.
Right.
If I as an HR person can find a way to help the business pay for that new machine that we need, as a a partner to the business, not pushing it away and saying I care about the people nobody else does. It's
Right.
such a misconception that finance doesn't care about people. Every finance person I've met that passionately cares about people, but they have a job. And when you can rightly relate to the group around you, and part of that is getting out of this mindset of, yeah, we're a cost center, but nobody listens to me. I'm just HR. I'm just an administrative role. And I would challenge anybody. What you're doing is more important than probably the most important role in the company. And I think we know it on this call. And you might be working somewhere that doesn't feel that way. And
Hmm.
I understand that, but it is. Be secure in that and go into meetings as a partner to the business to solve the business problems, not just advocate for people. I don't think they're separate. I think they're the same. And when you can insert yourself like that, you just become so influential and important. And it doesn't mean you have to. We had one lady save enough money, she got a bonus. So I'm not saying you're always going to get a bonus, but that can also happen. But you just become more influential, and that's what we need. HR people to be, not for our careers, but because these are people, and this is what is the most important, to your point, when we wake up in the morning.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, this has just been a fantastic conversation. I know we've only scratched the surface. There's a whole lot more to be said about ICRAs, about really, total compensation strategy,
Yeah.
motivating and reinvesting in people. Huge topic, lots of things that could be explored. But if people in the audience wanted to learn more about your company, about ICRAs, what would be next steps? And then we can wrap up for today.
Yeah, I would, I think you can go to takecommandhealth.com is our website. There's a link to the ebook that I wrote that might be interesting to you all. um, might and I think the practical steps is talk to whoever is your benefit consultant or broker and get the data. This is the HR hack, right? Is let the data suggest things, not just you. And if you get the data and you could see the kind of savings and you can really think about and strategize what the business could do, let the data speak for itself. So talk to an ICRA administrator. Take Command is one of them. Of course, I prefer it over others, but really we love the vehicle of ICRA and think it can really unlock something for your listeners. And I'm not going to make any money doing this. I really showed up because for the same reasons you're doing this, because I'm passionate about this.
Yeah, I love it. As we wrap up for today, any final word? And you mentioned the ebook. You mentioned I'll put the link in the bio, or in the show notes. Anything else in terms of parting words?
Maybe just for the HR nerds, ICRA is an alternative to a group plan, and that's at its simplest. That's what it is. It's not a scary thing. It's a complicated word, but it's not that scary. It's an alternative, and so if you have to provide a benefit, ICRA is something that I would say, are required to at least look into.
Yeah.
And I think the parting word would be, if you had $1 million to help your business grow. I don't know how big your business is, so a million might not be good. But if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? And I would want your listeners just start thinking about that. I don't know that ICRA will solve that, but it will help start thinking strategically about solving the business problems and not just what we think is our prerogative, which is like benefits and admin work.
Love it. Andy, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Andy can do for you. Check out the ebook, other resources. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.